Don't look!
The quiet corners of the country held their secrets close, and though Adam and Charlie were away seeking refuge in the coastal sun, the records of local legends remained open. These were the stories of ordinary people thrust into the terrible, unexplainable darkness of the mundane. Molly was exactly the sort of person such darkness preyed upon. Young, sharp, and desperately broke, she was 20 years old and faced a mounting mountain of college debt. When the job opportunity for the graveyard shift at the last stop gas station arose, she ignored the extreme isolation and the unnervingly high wage. Cash was king, and cash was necessary. The gas station lived up to its ominous name. It sat alone on a desolate two-lane highway, surrounded on all four sides by miles of dark, whispering cornfields that stretched into the rapidly fading daylight. The sky was immense and indifferent, casting long, menacing shadows over the property. Molly arrived just before 5 p.m. The owner, a thin, middle-aged man named Frank, was already agitated. His eyes were wide and constantly darting between Molly and the huge empty windows, refusing to look directly out at the cornfields. "Here are the keys," Frank rattled out, his voice strained and quick. He barely made eye contact. "The register is simple. Don't worry about customers, it's always slow after 6. He pointed a trembling finger toward a heavy black ledger book, then to a crumpled, stained piece of paper taped crudely to the counter beside the register. "That's your guide. Read it twice. Don't break the rules. I'll be back at dawn. Don't call me. Don't leave the building." Before Molly could ask a single question about the strange rules or his profound fear, Frank was gone. He sprinted out the door, threw his sedan into reverse, and sped away down the highway, his taillights vanishing into the sunset haze. Molly watched him go, shaking her head. A lunatic, she thought, pouring herself a cup of stale coffee. Just eccentric. She turned her attention to the counter and smoothed the wrinkled sheet of paper. The handwriting was faint, erratic, and clearly written in extreme haste. The list of rules. 1. After 10 p.m., secure the front door and turn off the exterior lights. 2. Do not look at the shadows at the edge of the cornfield. 3. Do not open the door for anyone after midnight. 4. If you hear crying outside the windows, ignore the sound. Do not acknowledge the sound. 5. If the register flashes error, balance due, you must hit cancel immediately. 6. Above all, do not look at the mirror behind the counter. Molly snorted, stifling a laugh. Definitely a prank. Some kind of initiation ritual for the new girl. She crumpled the list and tossed it into the nearest bin. Yet, as the final sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the world outside into absolute darkness, the station's silence felt less humorous and more heavy with cold, undeniable dread. Molly had spent the quiet hours after sunset doing inventory, the profound isolation of the gas station settling deep into her bones. She kept glancing at the spot where she had tossed the crumpled rule list. The laughter had died entirely. The clock above the register glowed 12 o'clock a.m. The precise moment the numbers clicked, the silence of the station was violently shattered. A furious, heavy banging erupted against the glass front door, a sound of immediate, panicked desperation. Molly jumped, knocking her coffee cup over. Standing outside, framed by the cold, black night, was a woman. She was young, dressed in light clothes, inappropriate for the cold, and her face was streaked with tears and absolute terror. She was throwing her body against the door, screaming, begging, her voice raw and desperate. "Help me, please, open the door. Someone is chasing me. They're right behind me." Molly's instinct, her human, moral response, was immediate. She was an emergency worker in miniature. Her job was to help people in distress. She lunged toward the counter, ready to slide the bolt back, but the memory of the rules slammed into her mind. Do not open the door after midnight. She froze, her hand hovering over the heavy steel bar. She stared at the woman, a genuine physical human being in apparent mortal danger, and the profound conflict seized her. The woman was desperate, terrified, and clearly injured. "I can't," Molly whispered, pressing her forehead against the cool glass, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I can't. Go to the highway. Find a car." The woman's screaming intensified, her plea dissolving into raw, guttural noise. Molly watched the horrifying display and then noticed the chilling change. The screaming began to lose its frantic human quality. It became rhythmic, sustained, and utterly mechanical, repeating the same 3 or 4 syllables of "Help me!" with unnerving perfect regularity. The terror in her eyes remained, but the sound was machine-like. Molly realized she wasn't listening to panic. She was listening to a lure. She stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak, forced to watch the horrifying mechanical performance. Suddenly, the screaming woman stopped. She cut off mid-breath with a sharp, sickening silence. Her head snapped upward. The terror in her eyes dissipated instantly, leaving them flat, vacant, and utterly dead. The woman smiled. It was a wide, unnatural, sickening grin that stretched her features beyond normal human limits. Her body went rigid. With unnerving, deliberate slowness, she lifted her head, fixed her dead eyes on Molly, and slammed her forehead once, hard against the glass with a dull thud. She did not wait for a response. The woman turned and began to walk backward, slowly, deliberately, into the profound blackness of the surrounding cornfields. She was swallowed instantly by the night, leaving Molly alone, shaking, with the terrifying certainty that the rules were not a joke. Molly stood frozen behind the counter, staring at the empty space where the screaming woman had vanished. Her breathing was shallow, ragged, and loud in the immense silence of the gas station. She dragged a chair back behind the counter, pulling herself down, no longer laughing off the crumpled list of rules. She retrieved the paper and smoothed out the wrinkles, reading them with terrified, absolute clarity. The next hour was agony. She didn't dare look out the massive windows. She kept her eyes fixed on the low glow of the register and the hands of the wall clock. 1:45 a.m. The time was dragging, every second an immense weight. She forced herself to find a distraction, grabbing a worn paperback from the shelf beneath the counter. She tried to read, forcing her eyes across the lines of print, but her mind was a frantic, screaming void, incapable of absorbing the words. The monotony was suddenly ruptured by an external change. The motion sensor lights outside, near the gas pumps, instantly flared to life. They were harsh, bright yellow, cutting sharp lines across the cold, black concrete of the forecourt. Something massive had broken the perimeter. Molly froze, the book sliding from her numb fingers. She knew she shouldn't look, but the primal urge to identify the threat was too strong. She slowly, hesitantly, peered over the top of the counter. Standing directly under the flickering, harsh yellow glare of Pump 4 was the figure. It was the tall man. He was unnaturally immense, easily over 7 feet in height, his colossal frame elongated and thin. He was clad entirely in black, a long, heavy trench coat that absorbed the light, and a wide-brimmed hat that dipped low, obscuring his face completely in deep, impenetrable shadow. He wasn't moving. He wasn't pumping gas, and he didn't appear to have a vehicle. He was just standing there, motionless, his immense bulk utterly dominating the forecourt. And he was facing the glass. Molly's blood turned instantly to ice. His shadow, vast and distorted by the harsh pump lights, stretched across the entire forecourt and climbed the glass wall, reaching high above the counter where she stood. The forgotten list of rules screamed in her mind. Rule number 2, do not look at the tall man. Keep your head down. Molly let out a silent, sharp gasp, dropping instantly and brutally below the level of the counter. She collapsed onto the cold tile floor, her limbs shaking violently, abandoning the faint security of sight. She pressed her face against the dusty kickplate, heart hammering against her ribs with painful force. She closed her eyes, listening intently to the overwhelming silence. She could only hear the low, steady humming of the large commercial refrigerator in the corner and the ragged, desperate sound of her own breathing. She hoped the counter was high enough. She prayed the darkness inside the station was absolute enough. She fought the crushing, primal urge to look up, to verify if his vast shadow had moved from the glass and was now looming directly over her. Molly lay utterly still, pressed against the cold, dusty tile beneath the counter. Her muscles were rigid, screaming in silent protest, but she refused to move. The image of the towering, shadowed figure outside Pump 4 was seared in her mind. The silence was immense, broken only by the low, steady hum of the refrigerator. Then, the silence was invaded. She heard them. Heavy, slow footsteps crunching deliberately on the gravel forecourt. They weren't moving away, they were moving closer. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound was heavy, purposeful, and unnervingly loud. Molly pressed her face against the kickplate, inhaling dust and stale air, trying to shrink into the smallest possible space. The footsteps stopped, right outside the main glass front door. The pause was agonizing, stretching for what felt like an eternity. Molly could feel the immense cold presence towering just feet away from her fragile hiding place. She could almost feel the deep shadow of his massive frame falling over the register. Then the sound came, precise, terrifying, and utterly calculated. A slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap against the thick glass right above the level of the counter, exactly where her head would have been moments before. The sound was flat, cold, and amplified immensely in the empty store. The tall man knew exactly where she was. He wasn't seeking her, he was acknowledging her terror. The tapping continued, rhythmic and mocking. Tap, tap, tap. Each sound was a separate, agonizing hammer blow against her sanity. She squeezed her eyes shut, digging her fingers into the tile, willing the cold glass to hold, refusing the primal, desperate urge to look up, to confront the figure. She focused solely on the sound of the humming refrigerator, the only mechanical reality left. The auditory torture continued for what felt like 10 endless minutes. The tapping was persistent, patient, and supremely confident. Then, finally, the tapping stopped. Molly remained frozen, waiting for a final sound, a challenge, a word, a movement. The silence was heavy, but the tapping did not resume. After another 30 seconds, she heard the heavy, slow footsteps resume. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They moved deliberately, methodically, walking away from the front door, across the gravel forecourt, and back toward the dark perimeter of the highway. She waited a full 5 minutes after the sound of the footsteps vanished into the immense night. Slowly, cautiously, Molly pushed herself up. Her muscles screamed in protest, and her legs threatened to give way. She leaned heavily on the counter, her eyes immediately scanning the security monitor. The screen, illuminated by its cold, distant green glow, confirmed the silence. Pump 4 was empty. The harsh yellow lights remained on, but the vast, elongated shadow was gone. A wave of profound liquid relief washed over her, chilling her blood. She was safe. She had survived the confrontation. She scrambled to retrieve the crumpled list of rules, smoothing it out again. She realized the danger was real, but she had played the game exactly as instructed. Survival depended on rigid adherence to the terrifying, unspoken laws of the night.
The next hour was spent in tense, exhausting silence. She drank cold coffee, the caffeine doing little to stabilize her nerves. She kept her eyes glued to the security monitor, watching the empty forecourt, expecting the terrifying return of the massive shadow. The clock on the wall clicked to 3 a.m. The silence in the store was immense, cold, and absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. And then, the sound began. It didn't come from the windows or the front door. It drifted softly from the back of the store, near the locked door leading to the kitchen and storage rooms. It was a low, muffled sobbing. It was the sound of a child in distress. Molly froze, her entire body tightening. She was instantly alert, recognizing the auditory attack. She gripped the edge of the counter, fighting the instinctive urge to investigate. The sobbing intensified, becoming clearer, closer, and infinitely more intimate. It sounded exactly like her little sister Sophie, calling her name. "Molly? Molly? Are you there?" The voice was small, thin, and choked with tears. "It's so dark. I fell down, Molly. I can't get out." The memory of the rules screamed in her mind. Rule number 3, if you hear crying from the kitchen, do not investigate. But the sound was so perfect, so real. It carried the precise timbre of Sophie's voice, the slight lisp she had when she was scared. Molly knew her sister was safe at home, hundreds of miles away, yet the sound was an undeniable, immediate reality in the dead air of the gas station. Molly squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her hands hard against her ears, trying desperately to block the sound that bypassed her sense of hearing and went straight to her guilt. Don't listen, she pleaded with herself, rocking back and forth. The crying turned to screaming. It wasn't the mechanical wail of the woman at the door. This was raw, hysterical, human terror. "Molly, please help me. It hurts. They won't let me out. It's so cold." Her emotional logic started to break. The tall man was outside, the creatures were outside, but her sister was calling from the locked kitchen. Maybe she had somehow followed her. Maybe she was actually in trouble, locked in the supply room, a victim of the same evil that haunted the highway. What if it's real? What if I let her die to follow a stupid joke? The possibility was a devastating assault on her morality. Molly pulled her hands away from her ears, her own resolve collapsing under the weight of her love and guilt. She scrambled out from behind the counter, her eyes fixed on the door, the decision already made. The silence of the night was about to be broken by a devastating act of moral failure. "Molly, I'm coming! I'm coming!" Molly screamed, her voice raw with desperation. The powerful, hysterical wail of her sister immediately intensified, sounding muffled but directly behind the wood. Molly ran to the office supply drawer and grabbed a heavy-duty box cutter, the only weapon available. She lunged for the kitchen door, fumbling frantically with the deadbolt. The lock mechanism groaned loudly, resisting her shaking hands. With a final desperate twist, the bolt retracted. Molly didn't hesitate. She threw the heavy door open, plunging into the darkness of the utility hall. The screaming stopped instantly. The sudden, absolute silence was overwhelming, replacing the hysterical sound with a cold, terrifying vacuum. Molly froze in the doorway, her box cutter raised, scanning the small, cluttered room. It was empty. The room was just a simple storage area, stacks of dusty cardboard boxes lining the walls, industrial cleaning supplies, and a large, deep freezer humming steadily in the corner. There was no sister, no victim, no sign of struggle. Molly's mind, battered by fear and emotional manipulation, finally registered the profound deception. She dropped the box cutter. The metallic clatter echoed loudly in the confined space. Her eyes frantically scanned the room for the source of the sound. Her beam landed on a high, dusty shelf above the cleaning supplies. There, sitting quietly amidst the clutter, was a small, ancient-looking tape recorder. Its plastic casing was yellowed and cracked. The small reel of tape was spinning silently. The trap. The entire hysterical performance, the tears, the pleas, the specific pain, had been a recording, carefully timed and placed. She had violated the single sacred rule of the night based on a machine's performance. Molly turned instantly to flee, realizing the monumental, fatal mistake she had made. She ran back toward the open doorway leading to the main store. Before she could clear the threshold, an immense, unseen force slammed the heavy utility door shut in her face. The gust of displaced air hit her with a physical blow. The lock, a simple spring lock, snapped instantly, locking her inside the suffocating darkness of the storage room. Molly threw her body against the cold wood, kicking and pounding the heavy door. The wood groaned, but held fast. She was trapped in the cold, dark room, surrounded by supplies, the air thick with the smell of ammonia and dust. From the other side of the door she heard a sound, not a tap, not a scream, but a dry, rattling chuckle, low, deep, and utterly malevolent. The tall man had been waiting for her to break the structural integrity of her own defense. The game was over. Driven by a surge of pure adrenaline and desperate fear, Molly ignored the locked door. She scanned the small room, her eyes landing on the heaviest object, a solid steel shelf rack. She hurled her weight against it. The rack, overloaded with dusty supplies, tore free from the wall anchors with a terrible, grating shriek of metal. Molly seized the heavy, severed steel beam of the rack. She turned and slammed the jagged metal repeatedly against the door's hinge side frame. The old wood splintered instantly. With a final furious heave, the door burst inward, ripping the frame from the wall. Molly scrambled back into the main store. The immense silence had intensified, but something else had fundamentally changed. The air was freezing, dropping instantly to an unnatural, bone-deep cold that bit at her lungs. The overhead fluorescent lights began to flicker violently. Not the smooth, soft flicker of a dying bulb, but a rapid, aggressive strobe that cycled between blinding light and absolute darkness. Molly's mind, battered but sharp, immediately retrieved the next forgotten command from the crumpled paper she still clutched. Rule number 4, if the lights flicker, hold your breath for 10 seconds. She didn't know why, but the absolute terror of the situation compelled her to obey.
Molly gasped a single deep lungful of the freezing air and clamped her mouth shut, pressing her hands against her chest, beginning the silent internal count. The strobing light immediately revealed the ultimate horror. He was no longer outside. The tall man was inside the store. He stood at the far end of the central aisle, his towering, immense silhouette momentarily fixed in the sudden flashes of light. He was far larger than she remembered, his black coat absorbing the weak light. He was facing her. With every rapid flicker of the light, flash, dark, flash, the tall man moved closer. It wasn't a walk, it was a devastating, instantaneous teleportation. In the brief moment of darkness between the flickers, he annihilated the distance. 1. The figure was 20 feet away. 2. The cold intensified.
3. He was beside the magazine racks. His face, hidden beneath the wide brim of his hat, was still a mask of deep, unyielding shadow. But she could see the terrifying change. A wide, stretching, skin-splitting grin emerged from the blackness, revealing immense, unnatural teeth. The oppressive cold and the frantic lack of oxygen were paralyzing. Molly's lungs were burning. 7. He was at the candy counter. He raised a massive, shadow-cloaked hand. 9. Molly's vision blurred, red and black spots dancing before her eyes. 10. The lights snapped back to a steady, dim glow. The tall man was standing directly in front of the counter. His smile was the only thing visible, dominating the space, terrifyingly close. Molly collapsed, releasing her breath in a desperate, silent gasp. The lights snapped back to a steady, dim glow. The tall man was standing directly in front of the counter. His immense, shadow-cloaked figure radiated a profound, bone-deep cold, and the terrifying, wide grin was the only thing visible beneath the brim of his hat, dominating the space. Molly lay crumpled on the floor, lungs burning, consciousness flickering. She stared up at the towering figure, every muscle in her body locked in absolute, final terror. The knowledge of the rules, of the tapping, of the overwhelming auditory attack, it all condensed into this one inevitable confrontation. The tall man leaned slowly over the counter. The movement was silent, deliberate, and terrifyingly close. The profound shadow of his head fell over Molly, engulfing her in absolute darkness. The air around her turned instantly frigid, biting into her exposed skin. He lowered his head until the wide, shadowy grin was inches from her face. From the depth of the darkness beneath his hat, a dry, low, rattling whisper finally emerged. "You looked." The sound was not accusatory or angry. It was a simple, final statement of fact. A cold, absolute confirmation of her failure to adhere to the fundamental law of the night. The visual abruptly faded to black. The only remaining sound was the chilling, prolonged rattle of a low, dry chuckle that slowly dissolved into absolute silence. The intense orange light of a rising sun streamed into the gas station. The clock above the register glowed 6 a.m. Frank, the nervous owner, pulled his worn sedan into the forecourt. He looked hesitant, his eyes scanning the windows, half expecting to see wreckage or police tape. Finding none, he hurried inside. The store was utterly clean. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed steadily, professionally. The counter was neat, the floor wiped clean of any trace of dust or mud. There were no signs of a struggle, no splinters, no broken glass, no evidence of the brutal struggle Molly had endured hours before. The chaos had been meticulously erased. Frank let out a heavy sigh of profound relief. Just a slow night, he told himself. He walked behind the counter to check the register. His gaze fell upon a small, neat pile resting beside the monitor. It was Molly's name tag and her cell phone, both placed carefully on the black ledger. Frank picked up the phone. It was completely dead. He placed it back down and walked to the back. The utility room door was closed and locked. He checked the gas pumps. Pump 4 was functioning perfectly. The cycle was preserved. Frank returned to the front. He moved to the nearest shelf and retrieved a dusty, "Help Wanted" sign. He sighed, a deep, weary sound of absolute resignation, and carefully removed the crumpled rule sheet from the bin. He smoothed it out and reread the last rule he had written. He then pulled a thick red marker from the drawer and added a new, final instruction to the end of the list, his handwriting shaky. Rule number 5. Do not trust the silence. He taped the sign and the new rules to the window. He looked briefly out at the vast, silent cornfields, then locked the door and sped away, leaving the perfectly clean store and the new rules waiting for the next broke college student. The line is never truly dead. Tell me in the comments, have you ever received a call from an unknown number that knew your name? If you want to hear the next story from the Phixer, subscribe.